Hello there, welcome back to what I hope is going to be an Inde-Car broadcast. Gosh, I've been having some terrible trouble trying to get a stable signal around here. Anyway, to today's show. Today, Salvo has published an open letter which it has sent to every politician in Scotland, all political parties, government, ministers, everyone involved in the political scene in Scotland. And in this open letter, Salvo has basically issued a warning to all of those involved, Scottish ministers, parties, politicians, companies and individuals and investors, that the plans to open Freeports and special economic zones in Scotland are completely unlawful. Now, as you may know, Salvo is I think, the only organisation tasked with protecting Scotland's existing constitution and upholding and defending the laws which currently are in force in Scotland. And I'm not talking about UK laws, because there are no such things. The Freeports, which are being forced upon Scotland by the British government and now being aided by Kate Forbes, the finance minister of the SNP government, are in fact unlawful under Scottish law. They have always been so. There is a ban in Scots law on the sale of anything which does not belong to you. Now, when you think about this, the sale or the transfer of ownership or the power over a piece of land in Scotland cannot be made unless it is by the lawful owner of that piece of land. Now, under the current UK plans for Freeports, the control of these vast tracts of industrial Scotland will not be the responsibility of the Scottish government, and none of the current tax laws and regulations which govern corporations in the United Kingdom or in Scotland will apply to these special economic zones or these free ports. It will be a free-for-all. The corporations which exist there or invest there will be allowed pretty much to police themselves and will be paying a very small amount of corporation tax. Now, this might seem like a good idea on the face of it, but the idea that companies in certain parts of Scotland should have lower taxation and more relaxed regulation is, well, to some degree, maybe a useful thing. It might make it more likely that those corporations and companies would expand and hire more people, and therefore there would be more jobs. However, the downside of this is that the contracts which are being prepared for the Freeports give control over these vast areas of Scotland's industrial and rural landscape to unaccountable corporations and bodies set up by the United Kingdom which have no legal force in Scots law. And in fact, the United Kingdom is basically stealing land in Scotland and selling the rights to use it to whomever they wish. And that includes things like policing, it includes things like drainage, it includes everything, in fact, even including environmental protections, safety regulations, you name it, it all goes into the giant bin fire that Freeports represent. Scotland has never needed Freeports. Scotland makes vast amounts of money for the United Kingdom economy, not only from its oil and gas, but also from its renewable energy, its engineering, its health system, its scientific community, and its manufacturing sector. None of which would be, I don't think, greatly advantaged by having Freeports. But as I said, the United Kingdom government cannot sell or transfer ownership or power over property which they don't own. And in Scotland, because it's unlawful to do this, Salvo has now issued a warning to any potential investors that not only is their capital at risk by investing in Scottish Freeports, but they'll also be leaving themselves liable in the future to claims of reparations, in other words, money back for what has been lost from Scotland because of these illegal annexation by a foreign power, and their part in asset stripping the country of its resources, which also do not belong to them or to the United Kingdom government either. The issue of sovereignty in Scotland has long been, I think, confused and muddled simply because the United Kingdom has deliberately muddled it. But sovereignty in Scotland has never changed. The people of Scotland have been and always will be sovereign, and that is written into our constitutional documents. Unfortunately, England doesn't have any written constitutional documents and chooses instead to make the rules up to suit themselves whenever they feel like it. But they can't do that here, certainly not without risking legal action in the future, because when Scotland becomes independent and these crimes are then brought to court, everyone involved in the Freeports, including the politicians, the investors, the corporations, the CEOs, everyone who enabled these things to happen and for these thefts and annexations to take place, would be responsible for paying back all of the damages which Scotland would then claim as a sovereign state. So this is an important, I think, salvo, fired by Salvo, across the bows of all of those who think that free ports in Scotland are a great idea. And I include every political party in that which has already agreed to these. Now, as far as I can remember, and somebody will probably correct me if I'm wrong, the ISP and I think ALBA both stood against the idea of free ports. I am pretty certain that Alex Salmond has said this. I'm definitely sure that Colette Walker has said this. But all of the other parties, including the SNP, don't. And for Kate Forbes to simply greenwash the entire issue of free ports by saying that, well, we'll accept free ports as long as there's a green transition and all these companies fall within the guidelines that the Scottish Government sets out for its green transition, that doesn't make it right. It is still a theft. It's still a land grab, an annexation of another country's sovereign territory by a foreign power, in this case, London. So, although the Scottish people aren't able to do anything about this, Salvo is there to represent them. And Salvo will continue to be there representing Scotland's interests forever until it is no longer needed, because until we are independent there is very little that we can do legally to enforce this. And that's why a change of government in Holyrood is necessary in order for a tougher stance to be taken. Free ports should have been banned. Kate Forbes should have used all the legislation that we currently have for things like health and safety at work, for road safety, for environmental controls, pollution controls, and so on, to stop these free ports from happening in the first place, and not simply to roll over and say it's all right as long as they're green. It's not all right, and they're not going to be green because there's not going to be any oversight of them being green. Certainly not any oversight that could be enforced by the Scottish Government, who will just stand there whining about the fact that these free ports are not abiding by their green rules, when plainly the Scottish Government has absolutely no power to do anything about it. And that is always the problem. Until we have a government which gives itself the powers to act on these things, we have no chance of doing anything about it. But it is worth pointing out to all concerned in this legal document, which is framed in legal terms, that if anyone invests in such a venture in Scotland to seize land unlawfully and to use it for their own purposes and to exploit its resources, they will be liable for damages and reparations in the future. And also, their capital is not only at risk of being lost in the investment, because, let's face it, once Scotland becomes independent, those shares would be worthless. They not only stand to lose their money in the business arena, they also stand to lose a lot more, having to pay damages to the people of Scotland for the theft that they've helped enable. And that's my message to you today. Well done, Salvo, and I think everybody should get behind Salvo and back this letter and reprint it and repost it on every single social media platform. Let's make Salvo's statement today on free ports into a meme that carries on across all social media platforms. Scotland rejected free ports. Nobody voted for them. Nobody wanted them. And for the SNP to simply roll over and say it's fine as long as they're green is not good enough. We expected more from our politicians than that, standing up for Scottish people's rights and their lawful rights to retain the land that belongs to Scotland in public ownership, have been trampled in the dust in the rush to seem as though we're being green, when we plainly aren't. We are simply letting England come in and annex as much territory as they want so that corporations can do as they please and pay as little tax as possible. It's perfectly feasible for the Scottish Government in the future to reduce taxes on business by simply starting a wealth fund and funneling the profits from its own resources into the wealth fund. And in that way, taxes on corporations could be reduced without giving or selling or transferring ownership of any land in Scotland whatsoever. So that's my message to you today. I think this is a bold move from Salvo, but it's good to remind our politicians that they're not above the law, and they're not above Scots law, which is the most important one here. English laws do not apply. That is part of, not the devolution settlement, it's part of the Treaty of Union, that Scottish law applies in Scotland. And that means all of these annexations, these special economic zones, these free ports, are all unlawful, every single one of them. And that means everybody involved in it is running the risk of being prosecuted later on for helping them to happen. That's it from Inde-Car today. I look forward to seeing you later in the week when I may have some other interesting news to tell you. In the meantime, keep the faith, but remember, Scotland's land is ours. It does not belong to the United Kingdom. It doesn't belong to the Scottish Government either. It belongs to the nation as a whole. And the Crown of Scotland is vested in the people. And we are the rightful owners of this land. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.